Welcome to the Adapted Ambitions podcast. Here we rewrite the rules of success for professional women over 40. This is the place where experience meets reinvention and where we tackle bold career moves, inspiring pivots, and strategies to help you create a career and life that you truly love. My name is Ada Offonry. I am a talent leader and career coach with years of experience partnering with professionals at pivotal career crossroads. I've seen it all, from climbing the corporate ladder to leaping off it entirely, and I'm here to help you figure out your next big move. Because let's be honest, the so-called career rules we grew up with, they're really outdated. Your experience isn't just valuable, it's actually your superpower. So I'll show you exactly how to use the superpower to create your best chapter yet. Whether you're thinking about a career change, launching your own business, or you just want more purpose and balance in your work, you're in the right place. Welcome to Adapted Ambitions. Let's dive in. Welcome to today's episode of the Adapted Ambitions podcast. Today, we're going to be speaking about sabbaticals. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that I'm a big fan of sabbaticals. And if it's possible for you to do one, I definitely encourage you to do so. Whether it's traveling, taking time out to spend some more time with your family, testing out a new career, volunteering, whatever it might be, I think it's all worth it. So let's dive into today's episode. Now, I want to start off by talking a little bit about some of the benefits of a sabbatical. So the first thing is that I think it's important to create some space from time to time between the work that we do and who we are as human beings, right? And it's not a bad idea to just regroup and to rest and to think about other things aside from work. After the sabbatical, you go back to work as usual. That's completely fine. The important thing is that you have a chance to just sort of, mentally regroup. The other advantage is that, and I think that this was particularly important for me, is getting to grips with your self-image away from the work that you do. Let me explain what I mean. So a lot of people often identify themselves primarily by what they do. So if you said to someone, tell me about yourself, one of the first things they'll say is, I'm a lawyer, or I'm a doctor, or I'm a software engineer. And one of the best lessons I've learned in my journey as a coach is that we are first human beings, not human doers. And so the question I have is, who are you before you're a lawyer or an engineer or all of those labels that we put on ourselves? And I think this is particularly important for people who maybe are facing a lack of fulfillment in the work that they're currently doing and they feel stuck. And part of the reason they feel stuck is that they so strongly identify with the work they've done that it's difficult for them to think of themselves as anything other than that thing. And so a sabbatical helps to create distance, space, but also it gives you a chance to really consider who you are and refine your self-image, if you like, away from it being associated to a particular profession. The other advantage, I think, of a career sabbatical is that it's good for your mental health. We all know this. The corporate world is tough for a lot of people, but especially if you're a woman and particularly if you're a minority woman, right? Or a Black woman. I think that if you're somebody who's been trying to navigate the politics of the workplace and have been trying to, put on a brave face and push through, sometimes a career sabbatical helps you gain some perspective. And at least you can make a decision on the rest of your career and your future from a healthy, sound place. So I think that's important. The other thing is that for many people, particularly those who are looking to pivot careers into a completely different area and who are scared and nervous about getting it wrong, it's an opportunity to try out something without necessarily committing fully into the new thing. Right. So some companies give people the opportunity to take sabbaticals and be able to return to their job. So if you're able to do that, then at least you're hedging your situation and you're not necessarily taking so much risk. You're able to try out something before you come back to what you were doing before. And it's good information for you because the new career that you think you might enjoy, you might not end up enjoying. So that way you've tried it out. You've seen whether it works for you or not, and you're still going back to your full-time job. No harm, no foul. You just have new information and you can make better informed decisions moving forward. And there are many more advantages. You're going to meet people, you're going to test yourself, you're going to develop new skills. And for some people, the sabbatical is an opportunity to just spend more time with friends and family and engage in some well-deserved self-care. Right? So there are multiple advantages that we can go on to certainly talk about. Now, if you're someone who has considered taking a career sabbatical and you just can't get your head around being able to take some time off work, let's talk about some of the strategies and some of the considerations that you need in order to start making this sort of dream, if you like, become a reality. So the first thing I'd say is that if you're currently employed, investigate your company's policies. More companies than you would think actually have policies linked to longevity that allow people to take sabbaticals and return to their jobs. Part of the reason is a lot of people don't know about these, and some companies don't necessarily publicize them. I think some modern companies understand that is a massive selling point and so highlight these policies, but other companies don't. I know in one of my previous employers, you could take a career sabbatical for up to 6 months after 5 years tenure. But it wasn't something they promoted. It was something they whipped out. If you wanted to resign and they were trying to retain you, then they would offer you the sabbatical. But it was actually something that everybody was entitled to after 5 years. So definitely investigate it and don't rule it out just because other people haven't done it before. Ask the questions, speak to HR and investigate it. The other thing I'd say is that if your company doesn't necessarily have an official policy, maybe you want to explore it, right? I know it depends on the relationship you have with your boss or the owner of the company, if you have access to them, or with HR. So definitely something to ask about and to see if, even though there isn't an official policy, something can be carved out for you specifically. And let me say this, if there isn't an official policy, and even if there is one, you definitely want to have as much in writing as possible. So you don't want any surprises or to come into a different role or anything of that sort. So just be clear on what the terms are. Be sure that you're all singing from the same hymn sheet and have as much as you can in writing. For some people, it may be that they've made the choice to leave their current employer, and before they start a new position, they're able to take some time off as a career break or a career sabbatical. So if you're in a personal and financial situation to do so, then fantastic. Some people make that decision and don't necessarily want to rush into a new role. That's completely fine. And I say this to people all the time, when you're ending one position, if you're in a position to take a break before you start a new job, then definitely take a break, right? If you're not sure what you want to do next and you're in a position to take a certain amount of time off, then great, do it. The other thing I'll say when sort of considering a sabbatical is that, let's face it, with the COVID-19 pandemic and the way that is decimated a lot of industries and certainly a lot of companies, for some people, the career break wasn't necessarily something they were planning. It's something that's been enforced upon them, right? So, what I'll say in that situation is for some people, they need to find a job, fair enough. And you've got to do what you've got to do, right? To keep a roof over your head. But for others who are in a position where they don't necessarily need to rush into the next thing, then this might be the opportunity you've been waiting for, right? To be able to finally make that career pivot or finally make that idea that you've always had into a reality, to actually create that business you've thought about, or to actually invest in further education or training to be able to move your career in the direction that you want. So it may not be something you necessarily planned, but you're certainly in a position where you can capitalize on this. And this also applies to people who are still furloughed, right? Particularly those people who are furloughed full time. I would say that I've definitely seen an increase in the number of people who are, doing masters, trying to start online businesses or grow their side gigs. Of course, you're still employed, but this is certainly an opportunity to be able to capitalize on some of the interests that you've long held, but perhaps didn't have the time or the capacity to be able to complete them. So certain things to kind of think about there. So how do you prepare for a sabbatical exactly? And what are the tangible steps that you can take in order to make a sabbatical happen? Now, let me say this before I dive in. When I think of sabbaticals, because one of my passions is travel, I really love learning about new cultures and new people and seeing the world. I tend to associate career sabbaticals with travel, but that's not necessarily the case, right? There's so much that you can do with a career sabbatical, and it doesn't necessarily need to be travel. So I'm saying that because obviously we're all in the middle of a pandemic, and there might be people listening thinking, well, how can people take sabbaticals when it's difficult to travel anywhere? So just something to think about. So first question to ask yourself is, how long do you want to be on a sabbatical for? Right. So I've talked about taking a sabbatical for 6 weeks. I've talked about taking a sabbatical for 6 months. I know someone who was made redundant who is taking advantage of the situation and is taking a year-long sabbatical. Right. They've worked for a couple of decades and they've decided, you know what, this is a good time for me to just do what I want to do and I don't have to rush back into the workforce. So consider how long you want to take out for your sabbatical and be clear on that. The second thing to really kind of consider is what you want to do during your sabbatical, right? So people are able to do so much. And I talked about this just now. So it might be that you want to go back to university or you want to take a course or you just want to spend some time with your family and your children. It might be that, you want to try out that new career that you're thinking of or try your hand at building your own business. Whatever that is for you, be clear on what it is you want to do. This is really important because if you don't really have a game plan and clarity on what your time is going to be spent on, the time will fly by, right? Very quickly, you'll go from being a weekend to being 10 months into your sabbatical and you haven't accomplished half the things you wanted to. So definitely be clear on that. The other thing to consider are the financials, right? So in my case, for example, I did my research. I figured out what the flights would cost, what the accommodation would cost. I estimated, how much it would cost for me to live comfortably. One of my sabbaticals, I went to Spanish school. Don't ask me to speak Spanish now, but I went to Spanish school. So I factored in some of those costs as well. So, you've got to do your research, understand what costs are involved, and you might need to save towards, your sabbatical. And don't just think about the runway to the sabbatical, right? Saving towards it, but think about what happens post the sabbatical as well. So if you're going to need to get a job, I definitely recommend allowing for at least 3 months, right? Be able to survive for at least 3 months or even up to 6 months without having a job, because hopefully you can get a job really quickly or you go back into your previous position. But if you're in a situation where you don't necessarily have a job to come back to, give yourself time to be able to engage in a job search process and find yourself another position. So that's something to consider. The other thing is to really think about how you want to feel at the end of your sabbatical. So do you want to feel rested? Do you want to feel accomplished, that you've learned something new? What is it that you want to be feeling at the end of it all, right? I think that that's a really important question to ask yourself. You don't necessarily have to be busy during your sabbatical, right? I definitely reject this notion that you always have to be doing something or you always have to rack up a list of accomplishments. If your sabbatical is just to rest and take care of yourself and work out or whatever it might be for you, then fine. As long as you're clear going in that this is your objective and this is how you want to end up feeling. I think that that's the most important thing, and nobody can really make that determination for you, accept yourself. So just be clear on what your intentions are going in. And the last thing is to really kind of think about the resources you're going to need, right? So we've talked about the financials, but there'll be a bunch of non-financial resources that you'll need. So an example is I'm really big on being part of communities where people have similar interests to you. So when I was looking at taking my sabbaticals, I definitely found several communities of people who shared similar interests. And I remember a few days before my flight being quite nervous that I was taking on such a huge adventure. And I remember speaking to some gentleman who was basically talking about the fact that he had just come back from Guatemala and talking about how amazing it was for him. And that just sort of allayed my fears, right? It made me feel very comfortable. I could ask all the questions that I wanted. So if you're looking to change careers or travel in a post-COVID world at this point, then, it's definitely a good idea to integrate with communities where people have similar interests so that you can find out about the resources that you might need. And you can speak to people as well to figure out the strategies that they're employed as well so that you're making an informed decision when it comes to your sabbatical. So, what other questions do you have about taking a career sabbatical? I am a huge fan of this. I'm definitely going to take more over the course of my career. And it's been one of the best things I've done for myself personally. So if you're somebody that's thought about taking a career sabbatical, then I'd be interested in hearing from you. Or if you're somebody who's considering one, but you always sort of rule yourself out for one reason or another. Some people think it's extremely expensive to take a sabbatical. Some people aren't in a position to do so. If you've got children and, you've got many responsibilities, it can be tough, but more people are able to take a sabbatical than think they are, right? So if you're someone like that, send me an email. I want to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Adapted Ambitions podcast on sabbaticals. I hope you got something from it. As always, please definitely like and give us a comment or two wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Come let me know what you think. And feel free to also forward to your friends who you think might need to go on a sabbatical. Thank you for listening and see you next time.